Ghostbusters 2 is a 1989 released supernatural comedy directed by Ivan Reitman.
It's 5 years since the original film. Unfortunately, the Ghostbusters aren't really in business anymore, as well, in the business of busting ghosts anyway. Ray and Winston go to kids' parties in the old Ecto 1. Turns out that, they were basically blamed for all the damage to the city caused by the Marshmallow Man and the explosion of Goza's temple. And they were sued by the city. Ray's also got an occult bookshop, and Peter Venkman has got a TV show, World of the Psychic. Egon is, I don't know, he's doing lab stuff, which is kind of tied into the sort of the plot of the film, actually. The film opens with Dana Barrett. She's had a baby in the meantime, not with Peter. And we see some pink slime ooze up through a crack in the pavement, and she rolls her buggy through it. And then the buggy takes off with the baby inside down the street, and she has to chase it. She then obviously calls on Egon and Ray to help her out. She's working in a museum where there's this painting of this warlord by the name of Vigo the Carpathian. This painting is just a little bit creepy, and also just happens to contain the soul of Vigo, who wants to come back to life and rule the world. It's up to the guys to stop him.
It's New Year's Day, isn't it? So Happy New Year. That's why we're doing this film, because there happens to be a part of this film that's set on New Year. Right
at the start, during we see a bit of an episode of Peter Venkman's World of the Psychic, and he has a guest on who predicts that the world is going to end on New Year's Eve. And he says, well, what about your book sales? It's a bit soon, isn't it?
I think we were talking the other day about films that have now caught up with present time, and of course in that, Elaine, the character of Elaine, predicts it's going to end on 2016 Valentine's Day.
Yes.
Bummer.
But it didn't. She was wrong as well.
This year, on the other hand, yeah.
Well, yes. She's just a few years out.
So yeah, Ghostbusters 2. What a great film. What a slightly different to the original one, I think, but still a lot of fun. I think it's more family friendly, this one, than the original one.
Yeah, I think so, because the real Ghostbusters cartoon had been on TV in between the films. I think the studio wanted to make it so that the audience of the cartoon could also enjoy the film. So
there's a lot in this film that feels different. I think mainly a lot of the humour is toned down. The first one's great because it's very witty, that film. It has a lot of great. I mean, this film has a lot of great kind of one-liners in as well. But I think they're maybe less adult. Although I don't know, there's a few things in here which
a little bit. I would say it's definitely less. I think there's less swearing. I think
there's less swearing. They, of course, all the Ghostbusters stopped smoking. They've given up smoking in the 5 years.
Yeah, there's not. Well, Ray has a cigar a few times, although I don't think it's ever lit, is it?
Some of the gags between. I mean, in the first one, obviously, you've got the great setup between Dana and Venkman. You kind of get here, but in the first one, there are some great wisecracks, very witty stuff in the first one, which you lose a little bit of in this one. I actually watched it this evening with my brother, and my brothers were probably more than. I mean, I enjoyed Ghostbusters when I was younger, but I think I grew to love them when I was older. They were younger than me. They're both younger than me, and so they kind of grew up watching the real Ghostbusters, which I think I was a little bit old for. I don't know, because you're a big fan of the Ghostbusters.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's one of my earliest cinema memories. I remember going to the cinema to see the original.
I know why it was. I know. Confession time. I couldn't sit through the first Ghostbusters because the library ghost terrified me too much. Too terrifying. That scene came and I was under a cushion, because I remember we watched it. My mum rented it out many years. I think she'd seen it and she loved it, and she was like, "You guys, you're going to love this film," and for the most part we did, except me and the library ghost. But my brothers adored it, and they had all the toys. They had, because my mum was a stage manager and she was a model maker as well, so she actually built them. I know you could get the fire station,
firehouse,
but the fire station toy was crap. So she made them an actual firehouse. It was incredible.
I think I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, it was great. So my brothers were like totally Ghostbuster freaks when they were younger. But I think I was a little bit older than those guys. But I came to enjoy the films as I got older. And I really, really loved the first film. I think it's an absolute stomper of a film. It's an incredible film, and it's incredibly shot. This one is great fun. I think it still holds up. It's not as cool, it's not as edgy as the original one, I would say.
I saw the original in the cinema, and from that moment on I was obsessed with it. And then obviously they made the cartoon, and I watched that every opportunity I could. And when they announced the second film, I was like, when you're younger, time passes very slowly. It felt so long between the films, even though it was only 5 years. As soon as I heard it was coming out, that was it. I had to see it. I was, obsessed with it. So, I loved it. It's not perfect. It does sort of fall into that trap of just repeating the beats from the first film, to be honest. The courthouse scene could probably replace the dining hall scene from the first. It all kind of follows a similar sort of pattern to the original. And it's not as good, but I think the charm of the cast carries it through.
Rick Moranis is in there, and as is Janine. They're both in there. They've kind of been put to the background.
Well, I would say Janine gets more to do in this one. I think she gets more lines, doesn't she?
She's obviously been given coloured hair to match the real Ghostbusters cartoon that's since come along. I find Janosch's character a little bit like Rick Moranis' Lewis Tully character. He's kind of that bumbling. He gets possessed, so he's kind of replaced the. I mean, I think Janosch is great. And I think Paul McNichol plays him amazingly. I mean, he's so. Again, maybe he's not in it quite as much as he could be, but he's really great for the stuff he's on screen with. He's excellent, and that accent is completely hilarious. And that's why that line is so funny when he says, where's that accent? Where are you from? And he says the Upper West Side. It's a great line. It's delivered perfectly. And again, I think, I've said this before about comedy films, is that, it really is about timing. And these guys all hit it perfectly. They're such great actors, but they're such good comedians as well, or comedic actors, should I say. All the lines, I mean, maybe there's not so many visual gags in these films. I mean, it's a film, so there are visual stuff going on. But they're, hitting a one-liner and hitting it perfectly is great. I mean, Bill Murray's timing is amazing. The first scene he comes back into this, obviously when they first go to, Dana's had this supernatural experience again. She asks them, she kind of specifically says, I don't want Venkman coming along. And then he, of course, finds out that they're investigating her paranormal experience. And then, of course, they go over to her flat, and Ray comes in through the door, and she greets Ray, and then Egon comes through. And as Egon's kind of turning, she turns to close the door, and he's about to say something, and Bill Murray or Peter comes into the apartment. And again, he puts his foot through the door. It's just perfect timing, perfect comedy every time. And, I think, like you say, that's why these films survive. Maybe this isn't as strong as the original one, but because that cast is so, that cast is so well loved. I mean, Sigourney Weaver, an incredible actress, and just a really well put together cast, and that's why I think these films last as well as they do.
There's not actually that many ghosts in it compared to the first one.
No,
I mean, you got the courtroom scene. And then there isn't really much more in the way of ghosts. I mean, you get the montage, which again we had in the first film, so it's kind of a repeat of that again. So you see a few little ghosts there, but then there's quite a long section where there aren't really any ghosts. I still enjoy it. It's not, certainly not perfect. I mean, I think it did have a bit of a troubled journey to the screen. I think that the head of Columbia, when the original was made, didn't want. I think somebody else took over after Ghostbusters and had no interest in making another one. He wanted to make other stuff. And then someone else took over, and then they did want to make another one. But I think because so many people, you've got Ivan Reitman. Everyone had to agree, basically, because it was created by Ivan Reitman, Hal Ramis, and Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray. They all had to agree, to a script. Just took a long time for everyone to really want to do it and to get a script that everybody was happy with. It does suffer from some of the sequel tropes of retreading old ground, but it is fun to watch. There are some great scenes. I love the courtroom scene. It's lots of fun. Just the bit where they're digging up the road is funny. There's some great lines there where they're trying to explain why they're digging up the road. Even Vigo, he's not the greatest villain, but he looks the part. When he eventually gets to move around a bit at the end, he's quite an imposing guy. Played by Wilhelm von Homburg, who was in Die Hard and a few other films, in was a German wrestler, but he was actually voiced by Max von Sydow.
Yeah, he famously, I think he stormed out of the preview of the film when he found out that he wasn't his voice, it was somebody else's. But yeah, Max von Sydow's voice is perfect for it. It's that kind of dark, brooding voice, delivery that he does so well. There is another character in this film, and it's the same character that's also in the first film, and that is New York. I mean, it's all about New York, this film. I mean, there are many films that are obviously depict New York as a kind of almost like a co-star of the film, a character in the film itself, because you see all these wonderful buildings. I mean, I've never been to New York. You've been to New York, but it has such a prominence, such a kind of place that, even maybe more so than London, it's such a famous city, and it's got these incredible buildings, and it's famous for being New York, isn't it? It's so famous they named it twice.
Yeah.
New York, New York, and of course there was a song, New York, New York is a famous song, and I think that it is, and there's that great joke in here about holes. Is it holes in Fifth Avenue?
Yeah, didn't think anyone had noticed. I mean, I can attest to that. Well, I went 20 years ago, so maybe it's different now, but the roads were filled with potholes. So yeah, that was accurate. Maybe it's better now. I don't know. That was obviously, like I say, I went a long time ago.
And I think that's what I love about the look of it, and it's just kind of an atmosphere. And I think there's a great atmosphere in the first one, and I think this holds that atmosphere still. I mean, the first one, I love the whole end sequence in the first one with when the police take them down the street and they're playing "Saving the Day." It's a great musical number. I mean, this one has a great soundtrack. Maybe not quite as iconic as the original one.
I think because of there's a lot, it was sort of on the cusp of the 90s, and sort of hip hop and that was really taking off.
Yeah.
So it kind of cashes in on that. You've got Bobby Brown on the soundtrack. So there's a lot of hip hop stuff on there, which I don't know if it really suits the film as much as the music in the first film. And I think it probably ages it slightly more. I guess the music in the first one does as well. It was the 80s. And all the songs are very, sound very 80s. It's a decent soundtrack, but maybe, like you say, maybe not as iconic as the original one.
I mean, Oingo Boingo, great group are on there. Dougie Fresh, Run DMC, people like that. But it doesn't have. I mean, the soundtrack from the original film is an incredible soundtrack. Yeah, I mean, it is. I think that's where this film suffers. Is kind of a replica in a way. It's kind of hits beat for beat. All the plot points are there again in this one, and it doesn't really. It's not too original. It looks great. Some great scenes. There's some great lines. There's some great cameos in there. I mean, there's loads of little cameos that pop up all over the film.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have a few returning ones from the first film. The teacher from Ferris Bueller.
Yep,
he's in there.
There's loads of little cameos from from some character actors. There's even Ivan Reitman's son, Jason Reitman, who's obviously directed the new Ghostbusters film. He's the kid at the party at the start who tells them they're full of crap.
Bobby Brown, who does the song, he turns up. I think when his song is playing on the soundtrack, he turns up there. Chloe Webb, the great Chloe Webb, who hasn't done a lot of films over her in her career. I mean, she's done lots of films, but she's one of those kind of great. A lot of people will know her as playing Nancy Spungen from the Sid and Nancy film. She's done other films, obviously, but she's such a great character actor. And yet there's not many films I could name that she's in. In this one, obviously, she's great in this one, but she's only in a tiny part at the beginning. Yeah, there's some great cameos in it, and just a good fun film. I mean, it's a good New Year film as well. Obviously, it does kind of culminate at New Year.
I mean, basically, it's all about, because obviously in those days, New York was known as, being filled with lots of miserable people who wanted to be horrible to each other, and this film sort of capitalizes on that, and that turns out to be the source of this pink slime. It's all the negative feeling and energy from the city is manifesting as this river of slime. There was loads of films in the 80s and the 70s, I think, that sort of were all about the crime in New York and the general sort of miserable people that resided there.
I mean, obviously that other very famous New York film, Taxi Driver, also plays on the whole, the scum of the city, the slime that kind of lives in the gutter and all that kind of stuff. That this film also plays upon, and then kind of tries to turn it around with everyone coming together and winning the day somewhat. Yeah, what was New York like in the kind of late 80s or in the 80s? I mean, there's so many great films from the 80s and before, right through the history of cinema, kind of going right back to like the 1920s. There's some great films that really celebrate New York as its own character, which I don't know if we have the same, I mean, there are films made in London, but I can't think of many that really celebrate London as a character itself. Maybe more so. I mean, Trainspotting, you could almost say is a kind of is an Edinburgh movie, but maybe not so much. I don't know. It's interesting. New York really has that. There's something about New York that is really captured.
It's the skyline and the Statue of Liberty and everything. It's just been featured so many times that you just, even if you've never been there, you know it.
And I think also it's got that, I mean, I've never been there, but of course when you if you get the boat, for instance, if it's at the QE2, if you get the QE2 to New York, it comes into that harbour and you see that skyline. Obviously, that's what all the troops coming back from the Second World War saw. If they came home, they came into the harbour and then they saw that great skyline. So yeah, I think there's there's something very magical about it. It's just very iconic, really. We are doing this because it's New Year. It's not on Amazon Prime. We have been doing Amazon Prime movies recently, but this one is not on. I mean, you can rent it on there, or you can buy it on there. But I imagine you have it. I have it on disc. I couldn't find it anywhere.
Oh, I've got it on Blu-ray. Yeah, I've got the set that's got both in.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can get it on 4K now. This is the Blu-ray that's mastered in 4K. I mean, it looks really nice. It's got a few features on it. There was an interview with Ivan Reitman and Dan Aykroyd, which goes about I think it's about 15 minutes. Not particularly insightful, really. I mean, they talk about, the possibilities of a sequel, and they were both quite confident that one was going to get made. I mean, I think that was probably recorded before the remake came out. But obviously now, there is a proper sequel coming now. And there's some deleted scenes. Again, nothing... I mean, a couple of them are actually scenes that were just sort of filmed elsewhere. So when the guys go to see Peter and say, do you want to come down to the sewer with us? That was filmed like in his apartment. They go to his apartment to ask him. So I think there were some reshoots, actually, because some of it didn't test very well initially. So maybe that was, maybe they reshot that section. And there's the Bobby Brown music video. So not a huge amount of stuff, but yeah, a few bits and bobs on there.
Yeah. So really, Happy New Year, one and all.
Happy New Year.
And hopefully, 2021 will be. Yeah, it's going to get better. Hopefully,
it can't get any worse. Well, I say that.
Yeah, don't say that. One thing it will get better for will be us. We'll carry on going. We'll keep bringing you films every week, and maybe a couple of other things, but who knows?
At some point we might be in the same room again. Who knows?
Yeah, we might well be in the same room again. That would be nice, because we literally haven't seen each other since like March. I think it was the last time we filmed together. So although this has been working out quite well doing it this way as well. And that was Ghostbusters 2. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button over there, and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and join us next week for another video.